Our beloved 8% Hard AF Seltzer is now live in over 2,500 locations across the United States. We're now available in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, Ohio, Idaho, Illinois, Michigan, Montana, Oregon, and Texas. Go to hardafseltzer.com today, click on the store locator, enter your city or zip, and find the nearest location closest to you. Welcome to Drinking Bros, presented by GhostBed.com. Yeah, welcome to Drinking Bros, kids. Is it Wednesday? Is today Wednesday?
Wednesday, although it kind of feels like Tuesday.
It's weird.
Yeah, it was like a weird week with the inauguration, kind of got an extra weekend day. So,
yeah, Daddy was partying at the inauguration, then obviously the national championship. Man, greatest day of my life, besides my kids being born, obviously. You know?
Of course, man. You know, and we had, it was MLK Day, so like no one was working anyway, which was kind of great. So kind of worked out. Right. Inauguration, MLK.
Yeah, you know, my favorite part about it was that Steve Kerr did a press conference in the afternoon and said, I didn't watch the inauguration. I was studying Celtics tape, and then they went on to lose by 40 against the Celtics.
Sure did.
So maybe you should have watched more tape, Steve.
Yeah, probably didn't watch any of it. It was a Johnny Manziel sitch. Last year, kids, told you we were going to have the former presidents of Budweiser on the show. This is Anson Frericks. Welcome to the show. You got a big book coming out on Tuesday. Last call for Bud Lights.
That's it, man. Well, appreciate you guys having me on the show, man. Like, I love what you guys do. This is like an unbelievable podcast. One of my favorite ones to listen to. And you guys are doing some cool stuff as well, like in the whole alcohol space. I think we're going to have some fun today.
Yeah.
Just doing like one of my buddies, he's a Supreme Court justice in North Carolina. And he listens to the show regularly. He actually comes to some of our stuff sometimes. And sometimes he'll listen to it when it's nice out with the windows down. Mm-hmm. And he pulls up to his house. And it's somehow, I don't know if it's karma or God or whatever, the worst thing we say for that show just happens to come on as soon as he pulls up and his wife is standing right there.
Every single time.
Just be careful of that.
Yeah.
That's all.
But no, thank you for the time today, for real. This is... me personally, you're going to be one of my favorite guests. I have a feeling simply because you have all the answers. We've been talking about this on the show for, a year and a half now at this point, about the downfall of Bud Light. You were introduced to us by our COO back there, Tony. Hello, Tony. Thank you.
It's so good seeing Tony again. And it's actually the one thing I miss about this whole industry. Like, so many good people, so many good friends, and awesome seeing Tony in the background here. So
yeah, so he put us together. So I want to thank you for that. As all of this was going on at the time, you were there, and I think you got out of there, maybe 5-6 months before the Dylan Mulvaney thing happened?
So I left about a year before the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing happened.
Okay.
And it's funny. I left because I saw really this sort of train wreck coming where, like a lot of companies in corporate America started adopting like the DEI policies, the ESG policies. But even internally, Anheuser-Busch used to be like the all-time great American, blue-collared, middle of the country deal. Bud Light was all about sports. It's about music. It's about hanging out with your buddies. That's what it was about. And just the company was kind of changing. When I was there, we used the word meritocracy a ton, and that's how people got promoted. That's how you got new opportunities.
Hard work,
man.
That's it.
And competence.
Yeah. But and this is not only Anheuser-Busch. Tons of companies adopted DEI, ESG, these sort of policies, and so the company was changing. We started having. During our annual performance reviews, no longer was hey man, did this person get the job done or not? It's all of a sudden there was a principle of the company that changed from promoting people based off of how well they did to basing you off of the diversity of your teams. And it was big, bold, de-diversity, which was very, very different.
This is how they're going to start. I've heard this. I don't know if this is 100% true or not, but the NBA is going to start using diversity instead of the games to decide the championship now.
Oh, yeah.
You see how fucking stupid that sounds?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Nobody, this is why, sometimes it's very useful to use an extreme example to prove a point, right?
Yeah.
Nobody in the NBA or around it is clamoring for more 5'8" white dudes.
No.
to play basketball because they're not going to be able to, right? That's
or
just
Asians.
how it is.
Yeah, unless
right?
you're Yao
It doesn't-
Ming, that's kind of it.
Yeah, it's just nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, you guys saw,
absolute nonsense.
like Mark Cuban got involved in the whole DI. So he's like, DI is great. And then a lot of people are like, great, Mark. Then like, how about for like the Dallas Mavs? Like, you go find some like 5 foot like Chinese guy, to not run point guard, just because of the DI stuff. But it wasn't like that. But it was even like how companies were even doing their marketing. Like when you think about what's coming up, Super Bowl's coming up, and like the biggest like award you get as a marketer is like, do you win the USA Today Super Bowl Ad Media Award? That's like, did America, like 130 million people watching the Super Bowl, did they say you liked your commercial the best? And the company that's won more Super Bowl Ad Media Awards than anyone was always Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah, remember the Clydesdale commercial? I mean, that fucked people up.
There's a million of them. Remember the Bud Light Bowl?
The Bud Light Bowl, going on,
Yeah.
like all that stuff. So like they'd won more, but they haven't won one since 2011.
Oh, wow,
and
really?
so it's been almost 13, 14 years since they've won one. One of the reasons is like this company, instead of trying to win Super Bowl Ad Media Awards, all of a sudden started shifting to try and win these Cannes Lion Awards. Like Cannes over in France, like south of France. And to win these like European awards, you have to have a commercial that has so many.
The Jaguar commercial. The new
like
Jaguar commercial, that's exactly what they're looking for.
That's exactly what they're looking for. Like to win those awards over in Europe, it's like, do you have this diverse base and do you have all types of people that look this certain way and believe these? And like, it just didn't make any sense. Like if you're a brand like Bud Light, like, man, your customers, like, it's like this. Like when I think of Bud Light, it's like guys like this, hanging out, sports, bars. That's your customer. You don't need to be the Jaguar people.
No, it's the easiest. It is the easiest affinity-based marketing structure in the history of affinity-based marketing, right? Because that booze is already associated with so many things.
That's it. I mean,
right? Like all you have to do is put it in the same place as that thing that people already like, and they'll drink it. That's
Bros,
and make it funny.
Veterans, Spuds McKenzie, all the stuff.
You got it, man. It's all about like the what's up guys, and it's all about the here we go.
This
like,
goofy shit,
This goofy, funny stuff, man. Because like people want to laugh, and like when you're like drinking beers, you just want to be like laughing, hanging out, relaxing, having fun. You're not necessarily like getting into whatever the latest.
I like to think about diversity. Whenever I'm drinking, I take a nice pull off my Ardbeg Udigal, and I'm like, you know what? A lot of white people in this room.
Yeah.
It's pissing me off.
I'm really angry about it, but nobody thinks about any of that stuff. No. In your book, Last Call for Bud Light, which is out, I believe...
The 4th.
The 4th.
February 4th.
Which is that
it goes into
it's
Super Bowl
on
week.
Super Bowl week, right.
Yeah.
Okay,
but it's on pre-ordered now. Audiobook and paperback and hardcover. You can buy all of them right now on Amazon.
Grab this. It's unbelievably fascinating, and I think it's a perfect time to launch a book, obviously. But let's kind of go through the paces of it. What year did you start there personally?
So I started in 2011.
2011.
Yeah. So I was leaving business school, and actually my background was I was in finance before Anheuser-Busch. Like never thought about going into kind of like big corporate consumer companies. My brother worked at Procter & Gamble, and like Procter & Gamble was very hierarchical, and you only got promoted when your boss got promoted. Wasn't my thing. But in business school, I was interning in New York at a hedge fund, and one of my buddies was at Anheuser-Busch that summer. They had recently kind of moved their global headquarters to New York, and it's like you're a college kid, so it's like you drink free beers on a Thursday. So they invited me to this kind of happy hour, and I met these execs, and these guys were like, hey, like, why don't you come work for us? There was a great guy named Tony Milliken. He was my first boss, like baseball player at Florida, great guy, and his kid was playing lacrosse in college. I played lacrosse college. We just had a great conversation. At the end, he was like, man, come work for me, and I want you to come join this company. I was like, man, not for me. Like, I'm a finance guy. And he's like, man, like this company is like, frankly, like the world's largest, kind of private equity firm that happens to sell beer. We're like a meritocracy when people are like the best and brightest come in. We've just bought like, Anheuser-Busch, we've bought InBev, we bought kind of consolidated this big kind of beer company, but we're going to go buy Group Modelo and SAB Miller, and we need good people to do it. So I said, kind of thanks, but no thanks. It sounded like a good opportunity, but I wanted to, learn a little bit more. And they kept recruiting me over the next like month or two. And eventually, it was the night I got engaged to my wife. I talked to my wife and I was like, hey, like these guys want me to join this company. They actually want us to go live over in like Europe for a couple years, kind of join their finance team. Do you want to live in like Europe and kind of, hang out?
Was that when they had sold to Europe? Didn't they sell to like Belgium or something like that?
Yeah, no. So the background was that was just like 2 years beforehand.
Okay.
So like the background, like Anheuser-Busch like had a killer history as a company. It was started in like the 1860s, 70s time frame. Great American dream story. Grew this over the years. Survived the Depression. Survived Prohibition. I mean, survived like all this kind of craziness that went on. But they got to the fourth generation, and like it's a super fun story. Like the Anheuser-Busch family is like savage family.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like absolute like animals.
Yeah.
I mean, each of these guys from a generation, I mean, like through like, huge parties, had, tons of fun. But it got to the point we had Anheuser-Busch, who was the fourth. He was kind of in charge of the company in sort of like the 2007, 2008 time period. I mean, this was a guy that got arrested for basically having a DUI while driving his helicopter. He like literally parked his helicopter in Target's parking lot.
Is that an HUI?
Yeah, I think it's an HUI. I think that's how it works.
Helicoptering under the influence?
Like helicoptering under the influence, like went to grab some beer at Target, came out and was like, what is this, America? Like, with this bunch of cops like surrounding his thing, arresting him. He's like, what do you mean? I can't like park my helicopter in here and like grab some beer?
That's still not as bad as Hope Solo.
Yeah, that's true.
Fair.
She blacked out in a Walmart parking lot with the kids in the
back
car.
seat, at least the guy's kids were in the helicopter.
Yeah, this guy had, I think, like 10 dogs in the helicopter. And,
well,
like, maybe like a girlfriend or something. So,
okay.
I don't know. And I don't know, there was a bunch of firearms as well. So there's like a lot of stuff going on. Like, in this
Again, this
helicopter.
is America.
Yeah, everything you're saying sounds like freedom to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Not seeing the problem here.
Yeah, so
I believe he also killed a lady.
Did he?
That's you're gonna have some of that.
Bodies out there. Let's
Look, freedom isn't free, Bob. I don't know if you've heard that before.
Bob.
Yeah, I think there were actually two of them. There was like one in college. And
She died there. We don't know what happened to the other one, all right? But the first one...
Same with OJ. We don't know, okay? They're still looking for the real killer.
Yeah.
R.I.P. OJ.
So anyway, so like, it was a big company, but the guy who was running it just like wasn't competent. I mean, like most companies, it's hard to get to like second family generations. This one got to at least the fourth, so I mean, like it got much further than most companies. But
was it like the Spalding from Caddyshack or something like that? Like, did you just not know how to run?
Well, that happened
business?
with Levi's too. So Levi's huge in the late 19th century. Into the early 20th, and then they kind of fucked up for a while, and then these two brothers that were part of the family just took it back over again in the 1950s, and Levi's became what it is today.
Yeah,
right?
which is great.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of these deals like the guy just liked partying too much. Like you're the head of a beer company, like, which is good, but like there's got to be like a little bit of a balance.
Right.
It can't be like 99% partying, like 1% running a business. You at least got to do like a 90-10 or something.
Yeah, you gotta drop it down a little bit.
There's a great story. It was like during the the big annual Distributor conference that always happens with like Anheuser-Busch and all of its wholesaler partners. He sent in a video one year that was like, hey guys, would love to be there, but I got this like other event that I've been preparing for my entire life. It's my bachelor party this week, so therefore like just gonna blow this whole thing off, and that was just kind of the mentality,
Yeah.
So there was just a little too much partying, and so it got to the point where the company was like incredibly bloated. And, like not only did it have Budweiser, Bud Light, but they owned like SeaWorld at the time. They owned like Busch Gardens.
What? Oh yeah, I remember. I've actually received a year-long ban from Busch Gardens before.
Yeah, he was there.
Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
So here's what happened. I'm in the Army. I'm the 82nd Airborne, and they're like, hey, we're going to fucking give you guys a 5-day weekend, and for 2 of those days, you're going to go to Busch Gardens and have fun. We're like, yeah, that sounds good. We all agree to that. And they're like, oh, by the way, it got pushed to just the weekend. We're like, no. We're not being in a car for 6 hours 2 ways, right, to go from Bragg to Virginia. So we got shit-faced before we even got there. Me and my buddy Wes got kicked out for poking one of the Clydesdales' dicks with a stick in front of a bunch of kids and stuff. And then my buddy Derek Whita, who's a First Form guy now, I think he was wearing a blonde mullet wig, running around with his shirt off, peeing on stuff. I mean, it was rough. But we were
only a year ban for that. Though.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
That's Busch Gardens. Like you show up at Busch Gardens, you expect to do Busch Garden shit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Then our sergeant at the time, Chris Schubert, some security or guard or cop or someone was trying to kick us out, and he punched a hole through the fence. He was like, "You're not kicking anybody out." Punched a hole through the fence, and that was in that moment I knew we were getting kicked out. It's like we could have negotiated up until that point, but once he smashed that fence, I'm like, all right, let's just get out of here before this gets too real.
It's all over, but even that, why buy Busch Gardens? I know they sell a lot of booze and all that other stuff, because SeaWorld approached us for Hard AF Seltzer.
Oh yeah,
and I was like, bro, is SeaWorld still a thing?
Well,
I sent over the numbers.
Yeah,
they were disgusting.
Yeah,
about how much money they were making.
Oh yeah, and then how much booze
they
were selling.
Yeah.
Oh, insane amounts of booze. So that was sort of the thing. I mean, like the whole Anheuser-Busch company, it was like, man, like we got to sponsor all the sporting events and venues, which they did. But then after that, like, all right, how do you look for additional growth in the United States? It's like, well, man, like let's just start buying theme parks, and then when people come to the theme parks, man, we'll sell a bunch of booze as well. And then so that was just part of like the strategy. It was just like continue to buy all these things. The problem was like the company got too bloated. Like the growth really wasn't there. There was no focus to it. So
it's like a Cheesecake Factory menu. You can't be that good at that many things.
You can't be that good at like that many things. And you have like the guy running the business who's like, partying like bachelor party, 364 days a year and not run the business. So it got to the point where the stock wasn't moving, and there was another company called InBev. And so it was originally started as this group of 3 Brazilian bankers that kind of like consolidated the South American beer market, about like Brazil, Argentina. Then they bought this company over in Europe called InBev, or Interbrew, and that's what owned like Stella Artois, Hoegaarden and Left, those brands. And then in 2008, they launched a bid to buy Anheuser-Busch in the U.S. And then even though they were a smaller company, this business, just like in terms of the profit margins, InBev was running like 40-some-odd% profit margins as a business, whereas like Anheuser-Busch in the U.S. was running like 20, 25. And then so this InBev group decided, you know what, like I bet we could actually get to 40% profit margins if we get rid of like the SeaWorld and all the private jets and the helicopters and the just partying just all the time. And that's essentially what they did. So they came in at the time. It was the biggest buyout in corporate America history. So it was a $50 billion buyout. And happened right before sort of the whole like great recession, sort of great financial crisis. So there was actually like a lot of uncertainty if like the deal was going to go through, ends up going through. And then for the first kind of 2 years, it was like very, very Spartan where they're trying to pay down all this debt. So totally different sort of culture. Whereas the old Anheuser-Busch, literally August Busch used to land his helicopter like on top of the building.
Yeah.
And then that's how he would like come into the office, and he had an entire floor. I mean, it was like, it was like a golden bathroom type of mentality. And then all of a sudden, like all that's, kind of ripped out. The helicopters are gone. Everything is much more called like zero-based budgeting, where you have to like justify all your costs. You're no longer doing like $1,000 steak dinners at like Morton's, which is, like it's a bummer if you're an employee at Anheuser-Busch, but like it's good for the business long term, because it's just not, you just can't be doing $1,000 dinners every single night at Morton's. So anyway.
Yeah, I think Tony and I are going to Torchy's this afternoon. So that's kind of where we live, in that Torchy's realm. And to that point, I think even with him, when we were going through the hiring process, he'd suggested this like college bar. And I was like, we show up and it's this like, shitty Irish pub, that the food's not great and everything else. But at least we knew that it was a guy who wasn't going to be blowing $1,000 at Morton's and all that other stuff, where everybody else was like, oh yeah, we'll go to X, Y, or Z. And you're just like, all right, cool. But I need you to work and then also, run a budget and do all this stuff. So once that was gone for these guys, I'm sure they were pissed, right?
Well, yeah, they're pissed, but the whole idea was like, man, if you could have this sort of almost like mergers of equals, where on one side you have like Anheuser-Busch, which is probably the most successful marketing company and branding company, like maybe in American history. And then if you can manage that with actually like better sort of bottom line, running the business how you'd want to run it, man, you could go on and you could create like an unbelievable sort of like global, not only the biggest beer company in the world, but maybe go on and eventually buy like, whatever, Coke or Pepsi or like, who knows type of brands. And so that was sort of the original idea. And so I joined shortly thereafter. So the merger happened in 2008, 2009 timeframe. I was recruited in 2010 and then joined the company in 2011 and was originally on kind of like our finance team. And they based me, I was over in Belgium. I was there because for like tax efficiency reasons, we were running a bunch of stuff out of there. So
do most major corporations.
Yeah, most major corporations, like, just running it for like
Facebook, those guys.
All this stuff, And so that was like where I was originally with the company. And man, like everything that I was originally told about this business was correct. It's like, man, we're a meritocracy, like come in, get stuff done. You can quickly kind of move yourself up the organization. We like manage costs tightly, but then we started investing into the brands. And even early on, a lot of the same like marketing people were still around like after the merger. And if you take a look like in the 2009, 10, 11 timeframe, even though like Bud Light sales peaked in the year 2008, so the year the company was actually bought is when Bud Light sales peaked, they still started winning like a lot of Super Bowl ad meter awards. They still had great marketing, most because there were a lot of sort of like Americans that were retained and they were the ones that were doing a lot of the work. It was just like the better bottom line was managed. Things like probably started changing. I came back to the U.S. in 2013, back to the U.S. That's when I started being in the U.S. business unit. And there was a real like marked change that happened when they had a lot of Americans that were in these like 3-year retention contracts that kind of ran off in the 2012 timeframe. And at that point, they started bringing in a lot more sort of like Belgians, a lot more Brazilians, a lot of folks from overseas to start running marketing in the company. And this is when like you start seeing sort of like a big sort of shift in the organization. There was a guy named Jorn, and he became like head of marketing, and he brought this other Belgian guy in, and like I'll never forget this guy was running a lot of like the events for Anheuser-Busch and Bud Light, and these guys are like, hey man, Bud Light now is going to start doing like techno festivals. I'm like, techno like does anyone at techno like drink like beer? Like I just like do a bunch of like Molly.
Yeah,
and, like,
it's Molly and menthol cigarettes. That's kind of, and then water, a lot of water. Stay hydrated, kids.
And a lot of water.
Yes.
But like this whole idea was like, oh well, like in Belgium, like everyone loves techno festivals in Belgium, so like, therefore we should start like doing more of that in the U.S. I'm just like, I don't know, guys. Like that just doesn't like make a lot of sense.
The other thing too is like having sold comedy movies overseas for years and years and years. It doesn't translate. So like comedy in your commercials, because Bud Light was always hilarious, the commercials were the best and everything else, but you bring in a foreign guy to start running marketing, that comedy and that content does not translate to Americans very well. So what year is this? 2014?
So this is like 2013, 14 kind of time period, like some of this starts. And they had this one guy from Belgium. He was there for like 3 or 4 years. It was a complete disaster. And actually, like the last campaign that he did was really kind of like foreshadowing what happened with the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing. For the 2016 election, they did this campaign. It was called the Bud Light Party. And the Bud Light Party was supposed to be, it wasn't Democrat, wasn't Republican, it's just like the Bud Light Party, which like in theory could have been like funny, could have been interesting. The problem is like they hired like Seth Rogen and like Amy Schumer, who were like very sort of like leftist. And even like some of the commercials they started running in 2016, they would only run them in certain markets. Like they were running like just commercials in like New York City that were like talking about like at the time, like gay rights or just talking about like other controversial issues.
Because they were left and so they were running them in leftist cities?
Because like the company had this more European view of the world and like thought companies should get more involved, and we'll get more into this, but like more into like social justice sort of performative things, which Bud Light had never gotten into before.
Well, we're in Texas, so were those commercials airing here?
No, like just literally like in New York and others. But the campaign bombed. The guy who was running it was fired by the end of the year, and it didn't work very well. But it kind of foreshadowed something where like Bud Light just shouldn't really get into like sort of political issues because nobody likes it. Like, it wasn't really that funny, and just people just want to stay away from it. Then there was this almost like resurgence time period that came back. There was probably like the best marketer that I've ever met in my entire life, and like an absolute legend, this guy named Andy Gohler. And there was this time period actually from like 2017, 2018 to 2020 where like Bud Light started to come back. Do you remember there was a whole Dilly Dilly time period?
Oh, yeah.
Like, Dilly Dilly was a thing.
Yeah.
But like this goes back to its roots. Like there was this guy, Andy Gohler. He was like an Anheuser-Busch veteran, started the company in 1980. Actually, like was one of the original guys that launched Bud Light, like back in like 1982. And then had done a bunch of other marketing work, ran Budweiser for a while, did Goose Island, a bunch of the craft beers. They brought him back to be like, listen, like your last job at Anheuser-Busch, because he had like a 40-year career, was like, you need to like resurrect this thing and like bring it back. And I mean, Dilly Dilly was arguably like one of the most successful campaigns.
It was massive.
Like Roethlisberger's using like Dilly Dilly as
everybody.
As
everybody at the
like,
time, it was one of those catchphrases that just took off in the American zeitgeist, and that was it.
Totally, and then they put it into the whole like Game of Thrones was a huge deal at that time. So they had like the Bud Night and Dilly Dilly, and like absolutely killed it. And now all of a sudden, like Andy Gohler ends up retiring in sort of like the 21, 22 timeframe. And this is sort of like right at the peak when like every single corporation in America, after sort of like what happened with George Floyd and what happened with COVID.
Yeah, you had BLM, you had Me Too, you had COVID.
BLM,
I mean, it was the perfect
COVID.
Storm of liberalism.
Perfect storm of liberalism. And unfortunately, like even like, I mean, really conceptually, like what happened in corporate America is like, the purpose, there's this big debate over like what's the purpose of a corporation in America. This was happening in sort of like the 2015 to 2020 timeframe. And there's like two views of the world. There was one, this sort of like globalist view. This is sort of like the World Economic Forum, European view, like this European stakeholder capitalism model that says that the purpose of a corporation is to serve all stakeholders equally and get involved with activists and everything else. that was coming up against like the old American view of what Milton Friedman used to say was like the purpose of a corporation.
Make fucking money.
Make money. Like your shareholders are paramount. Like what you do is like you make money for shareholders. How do you do that? You understand who your customer is, you give them great products and services, period, go do that. But all of a sudden, like after sort of like the great financial crisis and banks trying to repair their image and everyone else, like they started evolving that purpose of a corporation away from Milton Friedman more towards this globalist World Economic Forum, European sort of stakeholder kind of view. And
they were being incentivized by governments to do such, by the way.
At the end of the day, like you follow the money. You know, you always follow the money with this. And so what the problem was, like the largest asset managers in the country, like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, like all these guys that control $20 trillion of capital, they're the single largest shareholders in like 95% of the S&P 500. Where do they get a lot of their money from? They get it from these like big liberal pension funds. So it's like State of California, State of New York, Sovereign Wealth Fund in Norway. And all of these organizations.
Which is the second largest in the world, by the way, oddly.
Is it really?
Like Saud's first, I think, and then Norway's second.
And Norway's
they're
second.
bigger.
It's like $2 trillion.
Norway's bigger.
Norway's bigger than Saud?
Yep.
Wow.
Like wild, right?
Because Saud is like $800 billion, isn't it? Or I'm sorry, it's look that up really quick.
Like Norway's, I think, almost like $2 trillion.
It is, Norway is $1.74 trillion.
Holy
Why? Why and how?
Because it's
like
smart. Because they've been doing it.
They have oil.
Because they've been doing it for a long time, right?
No shit.
And a small population. And so what's interesting about this is so especially when Trump first came to office in 2016, Trump comes in and like blows up the globalist agenda. He pulls out of things like the Paris Climate Accord.
He did it day one yesterday.
He pulled out of it day one yesterday as well. Pulls out of like, the UN, human rights deals, pulling out of the World Health Organizations. He's pulling out of all these organizations. And at the time, then all of these more progressive institutions are saying, well, like if government's not going to solve these existential crises of climate change and systemic racism and you name it, well, now corporations have to do it. So that's when they started putting a lot of pressure on all of these asset managers. BlackRock, State Street, were managing trillions of dollars of assets and saying, we want you guys now to force companies to start taking responsibility for all of these, environmental, social, justice type deals.
A lot of it's got to be rooted in like this so-called clean energy grift. Which is what it is.
There was a lot of the clean energy grift that was going on at the time. But again, you follow the money. So if you're with these big pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, you're telling BlackRock, hey, you're going to manage my money. But the big piece of this is how they actually influence companies is that if you're a shareholder of a company, you get votes in the companies. Right. And what they can do is because they own almost 30% of companies, they can sway votes at companies on big proposals. And before sort of like the 2018, 2019 timeframe, most like activists that would put up proposals that come like PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, every year, they're going to come in and tell Starbucks like we don't want you guys using animal milk, and then usually all these things get voted down. But in this post the Trump period, where now there's pressure on corporations and all these progressive institutions, they're saying, we want companies to get more involved in these issues. They had to evolve what the purpose of the corporation was in the United States. And this happened in the 2018 timeframe. You had BlackRock, led by Larry Fink, ran something called the Business Roundtable in the U.S. They got 200 of the largest organizations in the U.S., CEOs, to evolve this purpose of a corporation from shareholder value to stakeholder value in the United States. We're going to maximize value for all stakeholders equally. And stakeholders, you guys know, can be activists, politicians, like anything.
Yeah, it's stupid.
And so it was very nebulous. This didn't make any sense. And so this is happening, purpose of the corporation is evolving, and a lot of this, again, is a money grab because now your large asset managers, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, $20 trillion of capital, now they can start creating these ESG funds and DEI funds that are basically telling companies that you guys have to now become a net zero energy company. You can't have any carbon emissions. You guys have to have a diversity, equity, inclusion program, which can lead to quota systems for certain people. And this really went on steroids, like if you think about it during like the COVID time period. Yeah. Where like all of a sudden like corporations, instead of like serving shareholders having a clear mission, now have these like real fuzzy missions that are popping up. Like, am I supposed to serve shareholders, stakeholders? Am I supposed to be involved in environmental things, social justice things? What do I do? And the COVID time period is interesting because as you guys remember, like, in March 2020, the world shutting down. You're hearing about this existential threat of COVID. You have Trump at the time is getting a lot of pressure to put in some place called the Defense Production Act. He didn't want to do it, but this is the act where essentially like the U.S. government can compel companies for national defense reasons to get off mission, do different things. So when New York's shutting down, he has tons of pressure. He basically signs this act, and now all of a sudden you have General Electric is making like ventilators for the hospitals to be overrun. You have airlines that are flying medical supplies around. People are making masks. I mean, at the time, Anheuser-Busch was like making hand sanitizer.
Yep.
You know, Walmart setting up testing facilities. Like these companies got real off track to defeat this like invisible enemy of COVID. Well, I mean, as we know, like, you know, say we want about COVID, but like the whole flatten the curve thing, everything else, like the risk of COVID were like, of course, completely overblown. And within a month or two, like the curve was flattened, hospitals aren't overrun, there's no other issues. But like these companies to some degree kind of like celebrated this, like, okay, we got more involved in this issue, we kind of won. The problem was like all of a sudden, May of 2020, the next invisible enemy pops up. This is in like the post-George Floyd era. George Floyd gets murdered, and now all of a sudden there's this huge call to like systemic racism is the next invisible enemy that needs to be eradicated.
It's still on the field for the NFL. So if you look at the end zone, it still says end racism.
That's it. You know?
And I did, by the way. That was I stopped being racist.
Yeah.
Because I saw that on the Bills game the other night, and I was like, oh shit, man. This whole time I just didn't get it. But then, you know, when Josh Allen scored, I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna stop being racist.
I'm still holding out.
Yeah, he's gonna wait a while. He's gonna wait a while. But everybody was doing this.
Yeah, so so everyone's doing this, and there's a ton of pressure. Now all of a sudden where it's like you have Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, he's writing letters to corporations and essentially saying that you guys have to earn your social license now as a company. To earn your social license, you have to just no longer be about, you know, making money for shareholders, doing right, but now all of a sudden you have to get involved in these social justice issues.
Why?
Well, I mean,
like, why him specifically saying that?
Because he had the power then.
Well, but
I understand he's got the power,
but he also the money again. He gets his money.
That's the power.
State of California, state of New York, European sovereign wealth funds. But also he realized that, you know, you guys in your 401ks, you guys probably have like an S&P 500 fund, and it's like you get charged, I don't know, 3 basis points a year, which is like, you know, 3 pennies on, you know,
the dollar,
you know, type of deal. Whereas he realized that if he could start making these ESG indexes of companies, and he would start scoring companies on how low their carbon emissions were, or how many quota systems they had in place for their employees, or how much money they gave to defund the police initiatives, all of a sudden he could charge like 3 to 4x people on these ESG funds than on the regular fund.
So again, it's all about money. In the same way that
it's all about money.
The thing that caused that financial crash in the first place, bundling subprime mortgages, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, like
they're just trying to scrape a couple pennies.
Yeah,
that's it.
And everybody else was doing that too, including the podcast world. So even in the podcast world, as far as advertising goes, they had these brand safety departments that were opening up. So they would charge the advertisers for this brand safety department to say, hey, we'll listen to these shows for you that you guys are advertising on, and then we'll report back.
And that's always the point. Noam Chomsky back in the 80s called this manufacturing consent, and it's where you build an ecosystem that forces people into compliance. It doesn't feel like you're being forced into compliance. You just do it because you're chasing your own success, right? Yeah. That's kind of how it goes. It's fucked up. I mean, especially, it isn't even just the money stuff for big corporations like Budweiser or AB. One of the things is, you mentioned it before, is the awards programs, right?
Yep.
One of the easiest forms of what we call earned media for big corporations is like the JD Power Award or whatever the fuck, right? You see these things, they run commercials on them all the time. Oh, it rated this best in safety in its class or whatever the fuck. If you couldn't qualify for any of that stuff unless you were an ESG company.
Yes,
you didn't qualify for any earned media.
By the way, same with the Oscars. So,
and when I say
win an Oscar, it's you've got to have 30% of the cast is going to be diverse.
And in marketing terms, earned media means free media, right? Which for a company that's like you mentioned this before as well. If you're a publicly traded company, your stock is your product ultimately, right? And if you're not constantly growing the value of your product, then you're fucked.
That's it.
You at minimum you have to stay 40% above inflation, right? So if somebody takes away the free part of your marketing apparatus, now you're not getting that, but you're having to spend to make up for it, right?
That's it. And then Anson, my question is, did these execs not look at the budget and just say, all right, well, this is how much we're spending on DEI programs? Because I'm seeing that pop up now more and more and more. Obviously, Trump signed the thing yesterday, ending it and making everybody come to work and all that other stuff. But once these numbers started coming out over the last couple years of what each company was spending on just their DEI departments and all of these employees, how do you, as a president, not look at that and say, man, we're losing a lot of money for nothing right now?
Well, that's it. I mean, what's crazy, but this goes back to like the problem we were talking about. Like you start having these ecosystems in place that are hard to break. So like one of the other things why DEI departments became just very prolific across corporate America is in McKinsey. You know, McKinsey, the consulting company. In 2014, they created this big report that says diversity matters and diversity wins. And they had some study that shows that more diverse boards and corporations and everything perform better financially. Now, of course, like this was just sort of a whole like cash grab to be able to go in and sell all these services to corporations, talk about how they're not diverse enough and how they're not equitable enough and everything else. Now, this study has been like debunked multiple times afterwards. They've been unable to replicate the original study that they did in subsequent years. But this all of a sudden became McKinsey saying, okay, you got to have DEI. BlackRock saying DEI. All of the universities that are like that are even to recruit
Harvard, Columbia,
Harvard, Yale, all this. So like to even recruit at those universities, you have to have a DEI and an ESG statement as a company. So all of a sudden, like it just becomes very interlocked. As we've seen with what's happened at universities over the last year or two, there was like a very progressive agenda, obviously at universities. This whole like oppressor versus oppressed, and we're going to have trigger warnings and all the silliness that's going on in universities. Then all of a sudden that gets pressured at corporations because unless corporations, they sort of adopt policy, they can't recruit on campus. To your point, you can't advertise or get free earned media. Like all this starts feeding on itself. And the problem is like it keeps marching forward in a very progressive way. Like even there's this organization called like the Human Rights Campaign. And like it sounds like a great campaign, right? Everyone likes human rights, like great. Well, in like going back 20 years ago, this was an organization that originally just gave scores to companies based off like, hey, did you not discriminate against gay people? Okay, fine, great. Like Civil Rights Act 1964, you can't discriminate, got it. Well, like over time, to get a perfect score by the Human Rights Campaign, which always fed into everyone's ESG DEI scores, like every year they would up the ante. And the ante now, is you essentially have to have like gender affirmation care for like all of your employees get a perfect score. You have to be able to have like so many commercials that you do in a given year that support the LGBTQ plus community. Even if your brand has like no, it's, not that discriminates against it, but it might not just necessarily be like a Ben and Jerry's type of brand.
Gay soda.
Yeah, I mean like that's
Where's my gay soda, man?
Yeah, I need that gay soda. I need a dick in it. Yeah. Okay? I need to stir that Jack and Coke with a dick, please.
But this is sort of like the problem that you're getting into, like just kept becoming more and more progressive. And you start putting these like DEI departments. To your point, going back, like what are these people even doing? All right, the initial thing of like DEI might have been like, all right, man, I just want to go find some best and brightest, maybe some underserved like populations. Okay, cool. Like maybe we'll go find some people. But then every year you're like, all right, now what do I do? All right, now we don't have enough of a person that checks this box or is this gender or sleeps with this person. So let's go find more of those. Like quota systems start coming in. And then if you were to ever raise your hand and say like, does this make any sense? Like we're spending a lot of money and a lot of time on all these initiatives. Now you're doing like anti-bias training and anti-racist training and like all this stuff where people are like, wait a minute, like why is it, whether it's Anheuser-Busch or it's Meta or it's Amazon, like why is it their responsibility to decide what
was it a lot of no white man like in these rooms? Because at that point, one would imagine, you're starting to implement it. You're getting the DEI hires in place and all this other stuff. Do you have to worry what you're saying in meetings and all that other stuff?
I think the biggest thing is like you just can't question it. I think that's the biggest issue with what happened in corporate America. And otherwise you'd be losing your job because if you even question like this DEI policy, I mean, you saw this over the last couple of years, you could be deemed like bigoted or racist. And the last thing you want in the United States is to be tarred with like the scarlet R, being called like racist or bigoted just for questioning a policy of like, hey, like, why do I have to go to like through an anti-racist training, or telling me about like my white privilege?
Yeah.
Like, really,
Yeah.
Is that like what I want to hear at work? Like, I just want to like, sell some beer and hang out and, whatever
I bet a lot of it came, I bet a lot of the, I guess, rebuffing the company came from finance departments because they're the ones that see the bottom line. Yeah. They're like, hey, this is fucking stupid.
Well, that's
right.
What,
it's ones and zeros. Like guys like you that came into companies, even in different roles that weren't in finance, that had done finance before would know better, right? And to your point, companies deal with this shit all the time. A new regulation comes out, you can't use this ingredient in your product, you can't use this style of production anymore, you can't use this container anymore, and they adjust and they fold it into the cost of the fucking product and pass that on to the consumer. That's what happens, right?
Yeah.
So they don't even sweat it. Unless it's something serious, right? They don't sweat it. They just fucking charge you more money for some stupid bullshit. And where's that money going to? To pay McKinley consulting firm. and so on, right?
And that's it, like in all these consulting firms that told you that, if you had DEI programs and policies and people, you were going to sell more product and you were going to make money. That just wasn't true. And in a lot of cases, everyone actually sold less product and there was just more product.
So can I ask?
or damage their brand forever, which I don't know if Bud Light ever comes back from this.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute, but can I ask, with these DEI hires, I'm sure some of them didn't work out. Are you allowed to fire them at this point, or do you just have to ride this out?
No, I mean, you have to ride this out, and because like, if you remember, actually the first person that actually went out and probably like fired somebody public in the DEI, it was Elon Musk at Tesla in 2023 is I think when it first was.
Okay.
And if you remember, I don't know if you remember this, but Musk was one of the very first people to come out publicly and say, like, this ESG thing's a scam. He called ESG the devil. And one of the reasons is that Tesla got kicked out of an ESG index, which was, again, never well defined because they did not have a unionized workforce. And he's like, are you guys kidding me? Like, I'm probably doing like more for the world in terms of like, whatever, lowering carbon and creating jobs and all this stuff. But like, I get kicked out of this index because I don't have a union workforce. And at the same time, there was like some tobacco company that was like, included in the index. And he's like, I just don't get this, man. This makes no sense.
And Biden wasn't inviting, so they kept having these EV conferences, and the man who revolutionized the field and makes the most of them wasn't even invited to the fucking meeting, right? Which to me sounds a lot like O&G was paying them to do this or something, right? There's always money involved in this shit. It's not always about politics and attitude and shit.
Yeah, I mean, there's always money that's involved in this thing. And this was like one of the biggest problems with, again, like whether it's the DEI movement or the ESG movement, it was never well defined. And then so all of a sudden, like whoever was running these departments was the ones that got to decide. And if you put someone in place, I mean, if you think about like a DEI, like chief diversity officer, the person tends to be like much more progressive, much more liberal. They're going to be putting in all of your quota systems in place. They're going to be putting in like the learning about your white privilege trainings. And you could not question this if you were the CEO of a company.
All right. Well, you weren't the CEO. You were the president.
Yep.
Do you have the conversation with the CEO and say, hey, guy, this isn't working, man. It's starting to get uncomfortable. We could lose our audience. Like, was there any of that before you got out of there? Because I would have, you have to at some point say, hey, dude, we're going to lose our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the biggest piece for me, there were two big things where like I just knew things had just fundamentally changed at the organization. One, like we do this annual employee survey every single year, and they sort of ask you tons of questions of like, you're proud to work for the company, do you understand the mission of the company, like a bunch of different stuff. But like one of the questions that like they were fixated on was, do you approve of like our diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives at the company? And it was like, 88% of people were like, yeah, they're fine. Like, whatever else, just, don't bother me, whatever. But because this score got reported to like BlackRock, that largest asset manager, to get included into their ESG indices where technically they would invest more money into your business, there was like so much focus on, can we get that score to like a 90? And at the same time, other scores that were like, do you plan on leaving the company in the next, 12 months? Like 50% of the people were like planning on leaving the company in the next 12 months. That wasn't seen as like a burning issue or an existential crisis. But like getting your DEI score to like a 90%, that was seen as like a much bigger priority. So therefore now all of a sudden you're having like meetings every single week about what can we do to increase our DEI score? How can we be more DEI? I'm like, guys, like this makes no sense. Like we're losing market share. We're not selling as much beer. There's all these other problems. And like, we're concerned about like our going from an 88 to like a 90 or whatever it was, on like DEI scores, like just massive waste of like talent and everything else.
And not a traditionally or historically accurate measure of how well a company's doing either. I mean, a turnover rate over 10% is fucking bad.
Bad. And if you're talking about
for a major company, it's really bad. And if at the executive level, you're talking about 2 to 3% tops, right?
Yeah. And it's like when the Great Resignation's going on. Like everyone's leaving, everyone's bouncing around. And this is why these DEI programs, like they actually never delivered any incremental value. And as we will shortly see, kind of destroyed it. One of the other things that was like a massive problem for myself, and Dan, I think you'll appreciate this, is, and we were talking about this earlier, but I was trying to at the time, think about how do we diversify beyond sort of like alcohol, get into more non-alcohol products, distribute more of those. And we were trying to do a partnership with Black Rifle Coffee Company. And like I was leading this partnership, and I said, man, like this like makes all the sense in the world. Everyone who's drinking Budweiser at night, is drinking Black Rifle coffee in the morning. Budweiser's the brand, they sponsor Folds of Honor and, do a bunch of military stuff. And so like we should do a partnership with like Black Rifle Coffee because they were just coming out with sort of like their canned coffee. And then everywhere that we were selling Budweiser at 7-Eleven and H-E-B and Kroger and everywhere else, great, we can just put the stuff on the same trucks.
Like tens of thousands of places around the country, and You know how you guys know from buying our booze online how expensive it is to ship liquid?
Yeah.
The more of you put in one container, the fucking cheaper it is for everybody, right?
So everywhere we're already sending full trucks of Budweiser and Bud Light to these places. Let's just put like cases of Black Rifle in there. That'll help Black Rifle out because like therefore there's synergies there. We can make some money along the way and like, who knows, there's partnerships. But because we have now like our organization is been moved to New York City, and you have New York City, you have our kind of like legal team and other people, and you have all this like DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. If you go back, this is now the end of 2021, early 22. One of the things that if you were a company and you were seeking to support brands that were like pro-police, pro-military, pro-law enforcement, this was just like persona non grata at the time within DEI departments because you could not be about, you had to, anything that was police related was everything. One of the reasons they put in DEI departments is what happened with George Floyd. It was like, ooh, we don't want to see if we want to get involved with those types of companies.
So was that the reason Anheuser-Busch said no to Black Rifle Coffee?
It was too controversial. So essentially it was like, even though Black Rifle at the time was being sold in Walmart, Kroger, 7-Eleven, there were all of a sudden there were all these concerns of like, well, like, if people see us putting Black Rifle Coffee like on Budweiser trucks, ooh, that could be like really divisive and like people might not like that. I'm just like, what are you guys again talking about?
Wow.
Like this is insane. Like Black Rifle Coffee, like their mission is to, serve coffee and culture to people who love America, and like first responders,
that was our mission
else.
statement.
Yeah. Like that's what they do. And like we should, and man, we had like other beers at the time, like Anheuser-Busch, they had, we had a company called Elysian, which was like a craft brewery that was out of Seattle. And they had like all types of beers that were like, I think one of them, or maybe there's like a Goose Island or something. It was called like, it's like it's gay IPA or something like that. And it's like, great, that's a craft brewery and it's like very progressive, like cool, like, that's their thing and go, no big deal. Yeah. That's their thing, that's fine. Find out what the mission is of the company, just support that. And now all of a sudden, like Black Rifle, because they want to serve coffee and culture to people who love American first responders, like, and I don't know, there were some people like January 6th that wore their clothing or something like that.
Correct,
that's
yeah. There was the guy in the cover of Time magazine had a Black Rifle Coffee hat on.
Yeah, but he was also wearing like probably Levi jeans and Nike shoes.
Well, he had a handful of zip ties inside the Capitol.
Well, he was wearing Nike shoes.
He was
for sure.
Yeah.
Nobody
said anything about
Nike.
Phil Knight got off clean on that one. Shit.
Right. So, but like it just like made no sense all of a sudden that like we just couldn't like distribute this product. And I was like, man, this is where like I just feel like we've just lost touch with who our customer is. Our customer is the Black Rifle Coffee customer.
So when you quit, did you tell the CEO this? Like, hey, I'm out of here because I think we're not following what our mission used to be?
Or did you do like half-baked? Did you go, fuck you,
yeah.
fuck
how does that work with somebody as powerful as like the president?
Man,
like, how does that work?
I candidly, like, man, I just said, like, I'm doing something entrepreneurial. I'm doing something totally different. I'm going to go out and do my own thing. And it was just like very much that was the conversation. And
Same CEO?
Same CEO, yeah. This guy, Brendan Whitworth, who, I had a great relationship with Brendan.
He's a veteran.
He's a veteran, man. Like, and like Brendan, like he promoted me twice. We have a good like working relationship, and it's frankly like frustrating because I think kind of like Brendan's trapped. And he's trapped in this organization because he reports into a global CEO. And the global CEO is more of this like World Economic Forum, more like globalist.
Well, they're about to lose a fuckload of money now.
And even the company, because now technically they're based in Europe, this is part of the problem, is that they have this more European view of like how business should be run. And they did not give Brendan the flexibility to be like, they put a hard stake in the ground and say, man, like we're going to run the U.S., how the U.S. should be run with American values for like the American consumers. And if you, so going back, like, so I leave Anheuser-Busch, like I wrote like some big posts that even when I left that was like, man, I'm leaving because like I want to go create a company that basically espouses the values of like what Anheuser-Busch used to. Meritocracy, freedom, the American dream. Like Budweiser is like America in a bottle, it's like Clydesdales.
Again, affinity-based marketing, dude.
Yeah.
Like
patriotism, the military, police, football.
But it's been the same for
100 years, dude.
Yeah.
100 years. So like that was, so it was more of like, that was the conversation. It was like, man, I think that like we've lost a lot of our way. I'm going to do this different company. So I co-founded a company called Strive Asset Management with Vivek Ramaswamy.
He's your partner, correct?
He's my partner, yeah,
yes.
buddy from high school. So we did Strive, and actually the whole thing about Strive was to like be a complete alternative to like the BlackRock, State Street's, Vanguards that were pushing companies to get involved in ESG and DEI. We said, we're just not going to do that. We just want companies, like whatever your mission is, I don't care what it is. If you're an oil company, go like pump oil, If you're a beer company, sell beer. If you're whatever, like just go do that.
Let's say you're a seltzer company, Hard AF Seltzer, and if you guys want to come on board, we're happy to have you, because that's our mission as well.
Yeah.
No, but with that, did he pick you off? Did he call you after that? How does that work?
With what? With Vivek?
Yes,
Or?
yeah, with Vivek. After Budweiser.
You guys are old friends.
No. Like we're buddies from high school. So like we've been talking about like what was going wrong in corporate America for like probably throughout the summer of 2021. So you remember it's like COVID, like, you know, you have more time on your hands, trying to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. So
Sure.
Vivek and I, we were actually like talking about like this problem that we saw emerging in corporate America getting involved in issues. I saw it first time I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. You guys might remember 2021. Governor Georgia Brian Kemp, he signs this law that requires you to have an ID to vote, Georgia Voter Rights Initiative. And
Which is crazy.
Why
Would you need to identify yourself to vote? It's fucking
Yeah. In America, you just have to prove you're American. That's it.
Yeah, like 30 states had this. So like, you know, it was, you know, that didn't seem like a crazy law to me, but like there was a massive pushback from corporate America, started with BlackRock. BlackRock was the very first company that said, we're against this law, we're pushing back on it, other companies should as well.
Didn't we lose the All-Star game because
All-Star game, that's it. So it's like you had Coca-Cola, Delta, based in Atlanta, they're like, oh, we're against this law, like, we're pushing back on this. And then when Major League Baseball canceled that All-Star game in Atlanta, this was like, you know, red pill moment to myself, you know, because we were big sponsors of that All-Star game.
Huge.
Like massive.
And Major League Baseball, by the way, other than hockey, probably the most conservative of all the professional sports.
Right.
Yes.
And then do you guys remember where they moved that All-Star game to?
Colorado, right?
They moved to Coors Field. I didn't sell a single beer at Coors Field. And I was like, this is ridiculous, you know? Like, so all of a sudden, like, they moved the All-Star where I was selling tons of beer at, you know, whatever, Truist Park. Then they're moving it there. But also I saw, like, a lot of my neighbors and friends and others were, like, throwing out Coca-Cola. They were, like, canceling their Major League Baseball tickets, being like, this is crazy. Like, this is enough.
Because I'm from Atlanta as well, so, like, everything in Atlanta, the Coca-Cola, like, all of it's there. So
feeding, there's an old saying from Churchill. It says, appeasement is feeding the crocodile hoping he eats you last. And I think that's what a lot of people learned. A lot of people learned that in L.A. recently.
Yep.
Right? A lot of people have learned that in a lot of places. Asheville in Western North Carolina is a very liberal area. I don't know if it will be anymore. So there's when consequences meet decisions, people fucking open their eyes.
That's it.
Very, very frequently that happens.
And it's slowly starting to change. And then it's obviously at Bud Light. They reached out to Dylan Mulvaney and all this other stuff. So let's get there.
Yeah. So
with that, do you know that woman personally who decided to do that campaign with Dylan Mulvaney?
I do. So like I know Alyssa well. Like just to wrap up where we were. So it's like anyway. So Vivek and I were talking about like all these problems in corporate America. He was writing some op-eds about all the censorship going on online with Meta and everything. So we kind of came together and said like, hey, like let's create this like new company and let's just go and just ask companies to be great, invest into them. And so that's what. So I left, started that, and a year later, this is when everything comes out with Bud Light. So and yes, I remember Alyssa Heinerschneid. I worked with her at Bud Light. You know, like nice enough girl, but like, man, this is somebody who like grew up in New York City, went to Harvard.
Not the right person for that position.
Yeah. You know, it's like, I don't know if she'd ever drank a Bud Light in her life or knew anyone who had. Like, maybe, I have no idea, you know? And it was funny. I mean, like, the week before the whole partnership with Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney, I actually had like an op-ed ready to go because when we started Strive, one of the things we did was we would go to companies like oil and gas companies, just be like, hey man, like quit like signing up for these like net zero policies for an oil and gas company. Or like we wrote letters to Disney and being like, man, get out of like the parental rights stuff like down in Florida. You guys have no business.
Were you guys publishing any white papers with actual data on it and stuff too?
All the data, all the things. We had recently written a letter to Mark Benioff at Salesforce, CEO of Salesforce, who was literally like giving money to like defund the police initiatives. And like overturning election. We're like, guys, cut it out. This makes no sense with your mission. And I had like an op-ed ready to go actually with Anheuser-Busch, you know, talking about some of like the black rifle issues, talking about some of the other issues. And this Dylan Mulvaney thing pops up. And I don't know if you guys remember, like that was like a very, very polarizing week in America before this happened. So you remember it was the week before Dylan Mulvaney. That's when that Christian school in Tennessee got shot up by the trans.
And they refused to release any of the information because we all knew what it was going to say.
Yeah, they didn't release the manifesto or anything else.
I think 9 or 10 months before somebody finally leaked it.
Yeah. So like it was very polarized time, and then also that's when you have all the state legislators that are going on with their work, and they were like, on 25 states, like transgendered issues, whether it was like should biological men compete against biological women in sports, it was like on the ballot. So it was like just very, very sort of a hot topic. And then it was on April Fools of 2023. So April 1st, this partnership with Dylan Mulvaney comes out when like all these like transgendered issues are like very heightened, very politicized. And like a lot of people thought it was a joke at first. I mean, literally like a lot of people, it was like, oh, it's April Fools. Like there's no, like obviously this is like a Bud Light April Fools thing. And then, they were getting like questions. Like the company was like, "Was this an April Fool's? This is a joke? Like if it's a joke, like man, this is like really funny. Like good job Bud Light." But then when the company came out, and they're like, "No. Like occasionally, like we send cans to some of our like bigger like influencers to celebrate milestones." And like they did a personalized can to celebrate a milestone of somebody who transitioned from a
100
biological
days.
male.
I've been a female for 100 days.
Correct.
And here's my Bud Light can to show, like, okay. That's something.
And if you're like a Bud Light customer, you're like, man, like Bud Light's whole thing was like easy to drink, easy to enjoy. That was their whole thing. And it had become the biggest beer brand in America because it was remarkably like apolitical. Like it never got involved in stuff like this. It's like people were drinking stuff like this, drinking beers, hanging out, sports, music, all those things. And it was actually like we did a ton of like demographics data. Bud Light was enjoyed by like Democrats and Republicans equally because of this. And now all of a sudden when it almost became like the Ben and Jerry's of beer. Ben and Jerry's, like at least Ben and Jerry's tells you on their website. They're like,
they're honest about it.
They're honest about it. They're like, we use ice cream to promote a socially progressive mission, and we want to give land back to Native American, whatever, like all this stuff,
They haven't given theirs back yet.
Yeah, they haven't given theirs back.
No, they didn't give their land back.
Which is an odd thing for somebody that's so hyped up about it.
I know.
And so this was all of a sudden like Bud Light had this choice where they had to come out and they had to be clear to people like, okay, guys, what's Bud Light going to be anymore? Like, is Bud Light what it used to be, which was just like fun, fratty, out of touch, whatever type of thing, or is it going to be like Ben and Jerry's? They had a choice to make.
Well, she went on a podcast, and
well, this was before the partnership.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
So
but then afterwards, she went on a podcast and then said, "Hey, we want to get away from the fratty movement and everything else," and doubled down. And it was like, oh my god!
Can you imagine Ford being like, "We got to get rid of all these dudes driving our trucks"?
Yeah.
It's starting to piss me off, man. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's like essentially what it was. It's like, but they had to make this choice. They either had to say of like, guys, we screwed up. This partnership was a mistake. We never should have done it. We never should have done it in the first place. It wasn't Bud Light. Or they need to come out and firmly say like, yeah, like Bud Light is now going to become like more like Ben and Jerry's. Expect to have like more, partnerships with polarizing, controversial people, like more in the the progressive landscape.
But did they do either of those things, or did they just not do anything?
No, and that's the problem.
That's the problem.
That's the exact problem. It's like, I mean, you get this, man. It's like if you walk through the middle of like, I mean, they would walk in the middle of a cultural war, and like they ended up getting shot at from both sides. It was like their loyal customer base was like, well, guys, like until Bud Light like either comes out and like, says, we screwed up. This is a mistake. We're not going to do this partnership again. I'm not going to drink it. And then actually people on the left, they started now, not drinking Bud Light either because they're like, well, yeah, we want Bud Light to come out and say they support Dylan Mulvaney.
They were stuck in the middle.
Like, there's no business or marketing school in the history of the world that would have encouraged anybody to do that. Not ever do you fucking try to bifurcate your audience in any kind of opinion way, ever.
And this goes back to this problem with this whole like stakeholder movement where it's like when you try and be everything to everyone, you end up being like nothing to anybody.
Yeah.
And that's where these guys like ended up.
And that's where they're trying to pick you off and it have it become your downfall. Because everybody, in my opinion, with Bud Light at least, like, and maybe you like it, and I apologize for saying this, but I think the perfect storm of Bud Light was not only the DEI and the Dylan Mulvaney stuff and all that other, it was that the beer wasn't really that good. And so, because we have a million options for beer. So people didn't really have a problem saying, fuck it, I hate Bud Light and I'll get rid of this because it wasn't the greatest beer in the world. Chick-fil-A. Homeboy came out and was just like, no gays and all that other stuff. Doesn't matter. Chick-fil-A is the best goddamn chicken on the planet and no controversy. Yeah, I never apologized, didn't do anything.
But you also, as a when you're running a company, you have to be aware of who the competition is as well.
Yeah.
Right? Like if there is competition creeping in, you have to tighten it up.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing with the military. So if I'm running an operation against some dipshit Bedouins, I'm going to do that quite a bit different than if I'm going against Russia's Wagner group, right? Because they are tier 1 operators.
Yeah.
I know that I have to do things differently against these guys. And you collapse everything. You go all the way back to the basics. We're only going to do these 3 things. This is how we win now, right? When you're the only one around, when you're Nike, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Nothing Nike does will stop people from buying Nike. People might say they're going to stop. Nobody stopped. They don't care about the slave labor. They don't care about any of it.
Kaepernick, all that other stuff.
Nobody cared.
Yeah. Like
Nike's still there.
Like you guys hit the nail on the head. Like when all like the kneeing stuff happened in the NFL. Yeah, of course people were like, I don't want to watch the NFL. But like, man, the last Super Bowl was the most watched one of all time. Because
was it like 138 or something?
You're not going to watch like the XFL or like whatever it is. But you hit the nail on the head of like the whole thing about Bud Light it's not, I mean, 95% of people, they can't tell the difference between Bud Light, Miller Lite, and Coors Light. The only thing they differentiate is its brand. And Bud Light was that like funny, fratty, down to earth type of brand. And the other
Coors
thing,
is like more of the family stuff usually.
like the Head for the Mountains.
Yeah, Head
like
for the Mountains. Yeah.
Miller Time, like, less filling, whatever the deal is. But like, and the interesting thing is like, why was the Bud Light boycott so successful? Whereas like in the NFL one wasn't, the Disney one wasn't.
Nike didn't even make a dent. I think their stock actually went up.
Yeah, it went up because it's like, Nike, there's like, this is good stuff. But like the problem with like Bud Light is like, it's not that really different from all those other brands. And by the way, everywhere you can buy Bud Light, you can buy Miller Light and Coors Light at the exact same price.
And it tastes roughly the same.
It's called value proposition, right? In marketing terms, this is my value proposition. My product might not be elite compared to the others, but this is what we believe in, right?
Yeah.
And if that's your value prop, like it would be like Black Rifle doing something to like, you know what? Fuck the police, man.
Yeah.
People will be like, well, cool, there goes my audience. There goes my audience really
dumb
quick.
as shit, man.
Yeah, and with that, so he never apologized. The CEO has still never apologized or anything else. They said it was a very vague letter. Did you read the letter?
Oh, there were like multiple times. I mean, like this is the problem. It's like, like the path to like redemption, it goes through forgiveness, but to be like forgiven, like you have to admit there was an error. And like, that's the thing, like it never happened. And there were multiple opportunities. There was like the first letter that came out and it was like this nebulous, like, oh, we love America and didn't really know. And like, we're involved in something. And like, everyone's like, what the fuck, And this was like, and it's funny because like this happened on like Friday, April 15th, that first letter came out. And Bud Light, had been gone dark, hadn't posted anything on social media. And they post this first, it was a Bud Light can, just said TGIF ? And it got 30,000 comments, all of them negative about the whole deal. And then a month later, when sales were still down, there was another letter that again was a nothing burger, didn't mention anything. And then there was this third opportunity where like the CEO, and again, like Brendan Whitworth, I always had a good relationship with Brendan. He's like a veteran, he went on CBS. It was leading into July 4th. So this is when they've lost 30% of their customers. They've lost $20 billion in market cap. Nothing's happening. And going to July 4th weekend, he has an opportunity to try and save the company, you know? And so he goes on CBS and they first thank him for hey man, thanks for coming on. Cause most CEOs would be running for the hills if they were in your position, But the first question he's asked is all right, man, after everything you know and everything you've learned, was this campaign a mistake? And he gives this mealy mouth, I don't know, maybe. And it's after that first answer, the host comes back and says, to be clear, you are in the position you're in because of the exact answer you just gave. So let me ask again, was this a mistake and would you do it again? And again, he gives a nothing burger answer. And so all of a sudden, again, everyone's well, man, he's at this point, he's had 3 opportunities, 3 strikes, you're out. And they've never recovered since. And I mean, it's funny because now there's been guys you remember, Kid Rock kind of started this whole thing, lighting up lights with AR and everything else. And he's actually gone on on Rogan and been hey, actually subsequently, the Anheuser-Busch folks have reached out to me and, we've actually had beers and stuff with them. And this is Kid's words, not mine. But he's Brendan essentially said that he was coached and he was told what to say and he couldn't, make any statements either way because again, the CEO of the company, the broader CEO is more European, globalist, ESG, DEI, that whole complex did not allow him to come out and to say we fucked up.
But also with Kid Rock, and I don't know if you know, I mean, he was paid.
Well,
they've tried to pay out everybody behind the scenes.
They paid Dana White. They paid Dana White.
Paid Dana White. They paid Kid Rock. Hey, they offered us money.
I'm sure they have.
I mean, they've offered every podcast money.
Gillis is doing commercials.
I got that. I remember getting that call, and I go, absolutely not. And I go, it would kill our brand. Drinkin' Bros, our audience, everything else. And I go, I'm sorry. No, that's a hard no for us.
Yeah, so Kid Rock said he hasn't taken any money because he's I just want to be independent. I don't want to be beholden to anyone. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, Dana White's obviously taken $100 million and is now all in. And even Trump.
Shane is always drinking it. Shane Gillis has always drank Bud Light. So I mean, that dates back years and years and years. Same with Post Malone. Those 2 guys get a pass for me where it's okay, great. But everybody else, and I won't mention the other podcast hosts that took these deals. But if you're out there watching them and you know them because they're all inside the top 40, if you see a Bud Light can on their desk, I mean, that's why, obviously.
So these guys have spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to reclaim their image of being this fun, macho, whatever beer.
You could have just done it with one statement.
With one statement.
That's
free,
the whole thing. Jack Daniels did it right there. So that bottle in front of us, because some people have asked, and it was hey, no, they came out in 2 days. And they said, dude, we made a mistake. firing the DEI department, everything else.
They said we fucked up.
Great. Because I don't, the bottle's right there. Like, we said, great. As a company, if you can learn from your mistake and then move on, awesome, man, we'll support you. But this Bud Light thing still hasn't fucking ended.
Well,
and to this day, if you see it out, and this is why I don't think it will ever recover, Bud Light personally. I think Budweiser is going to be fine. That blue can, when you see it in someone's hand now, is still a fucking running joke. I was at the national championship 2 days ago.
That's it.
And nobody was drinking Bud Light. I saw it back there. And then the one guy that was drinking it, immediately you hear out, nice can, dork, and it's just like, and then a lot worse, obviously. It's just become that thing where you see it in someone's hand, that bright blue can, and you're like, nope, fuck you. It's still a running joke.
It's still a thing. So that's why I actually think what needs to happen longer term. I actually think they can bring it back. I think it's not going to happen though under this current Anheuser-Busch InBev corporation. I actually think InBev would be much better off at this point selling Anheuser-Busch in the United States. And whether it's the Bush family buying it back, whether it's a large, Warren Buffett or somebody that has the cash to do it, I think you could actually have an amazing redemption story. And you could have one of the greatest American comeback stories of all time, where you sell the U.S. business, which frees up, $30 to $40 billion worth of capital that the broader business can go and pay down a bunch of debt and buy their stuff. But let now the U.S. come back with a story of back in American hands, American owned. We're going to get back to just being the beer that you always thought that it was. You could actually apologize, say we screwed up. There will not be any more the Dylan Mulvaney stuff. Yeah. Or man, I love Shane Gillis. I saw him last week in Cincinnati, and he's been he's actually a great spokesman for them because as you guys recall, when he was originally canceled, he was listen, if I ever offended anybody, sorry, most of my comedy's been bad over the years. It is what it is, but I'm going to still be who I am, deal with it. And now he's the most popular guy on the tour.
But Shane has been drinking Bud Light for 10, 15 years. It was just his thing, right?
Yeah.
We all had our thing. Fortunately, Bud Light wasn't mine, so it's not like I had to give it up and be oh man. But the others, again, it doesn't taste that different than everybody else. The others are definitely getting paid. You're spending billions of dollars now trying to get back the billions of dollars you lost on top of it when...
And it's not happening at all.
Simple statement. Because I looked at their numbers 4 days ago. Did you look at the numbers 4 days ago?
They still go down.
17%?
Yeah.
Still down.
I mean, the stock is at literally a 15-year low right now. And it would just be, but here's the thing, the people that are currently there, they can't authentically say we screwed up because they already had their chances and it's been too long. That's why you got to have new management, new ownership, new everything. But then I think you could build that company back and be a kick-ass great American comeback.
But who buys that? Who's got enough money to do that?
Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway. I mean, those guys are sitting on $100 billion worth of cash. Yeah. And so if you think about...
Buffett also primarily spends in what is effective monopolies, right? Yeah. And Bud Light could definitely be that, 100%. There's a good book about this called The Myth of Capitalism, and everybody should read it just to understand what's going on in the broader economy, but they kind of detail his pathway. Buying Bud Light would be a really smart move for him.
Yeah, I think it'd be a super smart move. He's got the cash. I mean, just putting in numbers, in the U.S., they used to do $6 billion of profits before Bud Light. They're currently doing
profit? That was their net revenue?
Profit. That's not net revenue.
Profit.
$15 billion of revenue, $6 billion of profit.
Holy shit.
In the U.S. It was that profitable as a company. After this whole Dylan Mulvaney thing, they're now down to $4 billion of profits. They've lost $2 billion, just in the United States.
Or a third, which is worse.
Yeah. Right. A massive amount of money. Yeah. And that continues to go down at this point. So I think what they can end up doing is you kind of put multiples in these business. You buy it for somewhere between, call it I don't know, 8 and 10 times that $4 billion. So it's a $30 to $40 billion. Man, that's only a third of Warren Buffett's money. And now all of a sudden he's got a great cash flowing business. And people I think would love to drink Bud Light again. They're oh sweet, Warren Buffett owns this thing. And you put some I don't know, make Shane Gillis the CEO of Bud Light. I don't know, And I think you could actually
something fun.
Yeah, someone fun and just come back. And I think you could have an awesome
and then just saying, hey, we're bringing America back, and Trump is in, and we're going to have fun again.
Now would be the perfect time to do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of positive sentiment right now.
Yeah, and for you, so the book is out now for pre-order. Last Call for Bud Light, the fall and future of America's favorite beer. Is that the only future? is for somebody else to buy this and rebrand this thing from top to bottom?
I mean, it seems like it is at this point, because we were talking about, it's like, man, they spent hundreds of $millions for the UFC. They have Shane Gillis. They got Peyton Manning. Like, they did all this stuff they should have been doing beforehand, and the sales aren't turning around. So, like, I don't know what else these guys do at this point besides go on, like, a big PR. And we get back to earned media. Nothing going to have more earned media than them, like, selling it, telling the story.
America loves a redemption story, dude.
They do.
America loves a redemption story.
And you're right. If it was somebody cool and they came out and said, all right, we're going to get back to the old school shit, do the old school commercials and everything else, because right now, I don't know if you read this, but Super Bowl commercials are going for $7 million for a 30-second spot.
Yep.
Budweiser itself and Bud Light, I think, has 7 of them. So they're going to air 7 commercials during the Super Bowl to do it. If they did a commercial during the Super Bowl and said, hey, we're back and we're doing something new here, does that help? Because, it's going to get 120 million eyeballs just here in the United States. God knows what it's going to get globally. Does that do it? Like, I mean, is that on the table this year?
I mean, like, they did it last year and it didn't help. Now, I don't think it was a very good commercial. It was like some Bud Light genie, and I don't think like it really resonated.
It didn't.
It didn't resonate. I mean, they could do something, but I think it has to come out. Like, people have to like really feel like there was like an apology, or like, they can actually forgive the company.
Yeah.
But I don't know how they do that. I mean, there's probably a way to do it like Shane. It could be funny. It could be interesting.
But everybody else has. So, like, the shift, and we've talked about this on the show for the last few weeks, the shift ever since Trump got elected has literally been overnight. Even at the inauguration, which we were all there. Tim Cook is on the stage.
Yep.
Elon's on the stage. Bezos is on the stage. The head of TikTok
Tim
is
wasn't
on the
supposed
stage.
to be there.
Yeah.
But then Bezos, like Elon and Zuck were coming, and then Bezos signed up, and Tim was like, oh, I better go.
Yes.
And like Meta, Amazon, everyone's ditched DEI. I mean, like, Zuckerberg's whole deal, just saying like, yeah, man, like we were working with the government, they were censoring information.
Totally. But right now is your perfect out.
Now's the time. Like,
everybody else is doing it, and you could do it during the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And you guys can end it. Like, you guys can
end it right now.
Like, end it right now
free.
and for free. And you guys were the poster shot of everything that went wrong with this movement. Like, let's get back to like American capitalism. Let's get back to great branding. Let's get back to being unapologetic, knowing your customer, knowing your audience, not having some like globalist agenda that tells companies how to act just inauthentic. Like, they have the ability to do it. I don't think they are, because I think they're going to try and continue to play it safe. I wish they would. I mean, I'd love nothing more that they somehow figure this out. Like, I'd love to go back and drink Bud Light again and, bring this back in a big way. So to your point, like, I'm not the guy at a bar with a Bud Light and everyone's just like, ragging on me for drinking a Bud Light. Like, I'd love that, man. That'd be a great story. So I don't know.
And I think that's the only way to correct it. And then with your book, again, this is out now. Pre-order it. That way it can help get on the New York Times bestseller list and all the other stuff. Is it Simon & Schuster?
Simon & Schuster.
Yeah,
that's
Simon & Schuster's doing it.
Yeah, and Kirby Hayborn did the audio too, and he's Gone Girl, bunch of fucking stuff.
Best in the biz.
He's one of the best.
One of the best in the biz there is. How detailed in this do you really get? Are you able to go scorched earth on all of this now?
No, I mean, like, it tells the whole history of Anheuser-Busch, my time there.
We put it up on the screen here for the audience,
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, it goes, like, very, very deep detail. Like, not only about, like, the history of Anheuser-Busch, even the fun things we talked about earlier. I mean, like, former CEOs that are, putting helicopters in Target parking lots. I mean, the Bush family was pretty amazing. But then, it talks about my time there, a bunch of details. But then gives it sort of like a broader overview of, again, like, what went wrong in all corporate America over the last 10 years. Not just Anheuser-Busch, but Disney and Target and, Facebook, all the censorship, all this, how that all happened. Why did Anheuser-Busch become the poster child of it? And most importantly, how do we move forward? And like, how do we get back to having, more unity and just having more, American exceptionalism, which I think that what we're doing right now. So
that's awesome, man. Well, look, you can read it from the inside. Obviously, you were the former president there. Buy the book now. Last call for Bud Light. Available for pre-order. Amazon's the easiest way to get this. It's at your house in 2 days. And then buy it before the 4th, because all those sales count towards the New York Times bestseller week in week 1, and then it starts over again after that. Now's the point in the show we get this thing called the Drinkin' Bro of the Week, which is someone who has inspired you or helped you become the person you are today. Who'd you like to give the Drinkin' Bro of the Week to?
Man, I love this Drinkin' Bro of the Week. Man, I feel like can it be my wife?
Sure can.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be like my wife, because she went on this journey with me for the last 10 years. I mean, moved to Belgium literally the day after we got married, and
that's nuts, man.
And then we did 7 moves in 10 years.
Like, get in, loser. We're moving to Europe.
I mean, I feel like without like kind of like the wife along the way supporting me, like, I don't think I'd be here today. So I'm gonna give a shout out to my wife for being the Drinkin' Bro of the Week this week.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Hope that earns me some points in the home front as well.
Yeah, and it's Strive with Vivek. Are you guys working with any beverages over there, and what other companies are you guys working with now?
Yeah, so I have actually, so Strive invests in the publicly traded companies, and we get publicly traded companies to not do the ESG DEI piece. I actually have like another, I have a private equity firm called Athletic Capital, and it actually invests into consumer companies. So we're investors in like Liquid Death, a company called Mike's Hot Honey.
Liquid Death is around here, yeah.
Mike's Hot Honey,
like,
they're in Whole Foods.
They were an advertiser for a while on this show.
Just like companies just aren't doing any like the silly ESG DEI stuff. Like, no, I mean, I think about Liquid Death. Like, man, I love that company. Where like they're just unapologetic. They're almost like what like Bud Light was in the 1990s.
Yeah.
You know, it's like funny, cool, unapologetic.
Like Dollar Shave Club and shit like that. Just doing weird shit. Fuck you if you don't like it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like because that's our audience. If you don't like it, like so be it. You know. I don't know if you remember the first Liquid Death commercial. It was like that video of a woman, and you just saw like her face and her arm, and she's pulling out water, talking about like how deadly water is. And the end of it pans out. It showed she'd been like waterboarding a guy like the entire time. You know. So anyway,
it was great.
Yeah.
And again, hey, we got one of those companies who didn't believe in it. So.
And hard AF, man. So hard AF. So I'm still waiting for the opportunity.
All right.
So let me know, man. Let me know when we can become investors in that also. So.
Today, as soon as the show ends, it'll be great. No, we appreciate you being here. Go out and buy the book, Last Call for Bud Light. Appreciate you tuning in. Go to iTunes, rate the show a 5-star, and leave a quick review. Also, head on over to Spotify. It's just a 5-star, and you can walk away. Thank you, Anson, for being here. For D'Anthony Holloway, I'm Ross Patterson. This is the Drinkin' Bros Podcast. Good night, everyone.